Hello and welcome to Under the 128, the podcast covering all things under the 128 PDC tour card holders. I'm Alex Moss, and alongside me, as always, it is the darting nerd himself, Matthew Kiernan. Matthew, how you doing?
Yes, really good, Alex. Another packed episode ahead. So much to talk about, and but primarily I've been practicing my doubles and practicing on taking my chances.
Glad you took that advice from the still world number one. Some great advice there, and I'll hopefully be doing that as well when me and you have a game next month. We'll be touching on that a little bit later, but as you say, we do have lots to get to, and we should probably start really with the event that's got a lot of attention this weekend. We're recording this on a Sunday evening. Yesterday was one of the Riley's UK Open qualifiers. Of course, when we last spoke, we were discussing were the Riley's qualifiers going to come back for the UK Open. Well, I think a week or so later after we recorded, the PDC Riley's announcing that yes, the Riley's qualifiers that didn't take place in 2021 back for 2022 across January and February this year, spots in the UK Open. But unfortunately, we've got to start on a sour note, really, and that is with the Riley's in Norwich. We'll come on to that in a moment. We'll get to the positive side of things first, I guess, because you were at one of the Riley's qualifiers a few weeks ago, the one in London, Victoria, which was won by Diogo Portela. Talk to us about being back involved with those Riley's qualifiers.
Yes, well, I think that the thing to say is that we didn't think this would ever happen again in terms of amateur UK Open qualifiers at Riley's, because of the fact that Riley's been really badly affected by the pandemic and the business issues, climate that they faced. They've lost a lot of branches. Now, in terms of the Victoria one, I have a massive affinity with the Victoria one because as well I played my first ever game, competitive match, played loads of matches there in the individual darts league, been to loads of opens, and been to the vast majority of UK Open qualifiers there since sort of 2016, and still used to play there at lunchtime as well. So, and in terms of Victoria as a venue, the challenges that they've faced is that they've got a flight club around the corner from them. So that is a big squeeze on their business model, because remember, flight club, that's digital darts, hipster darts, if you like, £25 for a board for an hour, and it's always sold out. So, Victoria took the decision in the pandemic to rip out the 8 steel tip boards, take those out, which used to be what was used for the open tournaments there and the league competitions, and of course the UK Open qualifiers, and instead they've got 4 digital boards at the back. So there was still a UK Open qualifier there this time, but they had to cap it at 100 players for entry. So loads of players missed out on the entry because they left it too late. And then they hired in 4 boards from Evolution Darts, which is in your neck of the woods, Alex, in Suffolk. Really nice setup there. And so they had to play the tournament off of 4 nice boards, which you normally use for digital darts at the back of the venue, and then 4 practice boards from Evolution Darts. Started at midday. They had 81 entries, organised really well by Owen Binks, Julie and the team, and finished about 8:15. And you could see the video that I took of Diogo Portela winning and his reaction, because he also played a load of darts when he first moved over from Brazil in Victoria. And so it's a really special sort of circular circle of life. But in darts terms, the fact that he qualified from there, beating Lee Evans, Lee Evans, as we know, is on fantastic form at the moment because he did well in the Challenge Tour and has now done really well on the Pro Tour as well in recent weeks. So it was amazing to be back there and be a part of it all. There was another incident, but we'll talk about that in a minute. It was great to be back, basically.
Glad to hear it, and I was hoping to be involved with these Riley's qualifiers myself. The local one to me is the one in Norwich, the Rob Cross qualifiers, we affectionately call it, because that was the one that he won and then went on to do what he did, becoming world champion a few years later. But the scheduling kind of didn't work out for me. I didn't go in the end to the one yesterday, and I probably won't make the one next weekend, but this is the one that has got a lot of attention on social media in the last 24 hours, and it's led to Riley's themselves putting a statement out on social media. They've said, "We are aware of the issues today at Riley's Norwich and want to assure customers that this is not standard practice and it has been dealt with. We apologise for any inconvenience caused and we thank you for playing with us today." And this comes off the back of some of the things that we were seeing on social media, the darts referee Jack posting a picture of, I think it was a rest in snooker being used as the ocky. Basically, you had to throw behind a snooker rest, but that was the tip of the iceberg, wasn't it? Because we saw the video that Ros Bulmer posted on Facebook doing a walk around the venue, and yeah, just some not nice pictures there. The ladies' toilets were shut, they were out of order. We saw things coming out of the toilet that which shouldn't be coming out of the toilet. A lot of the toilets being blocked in the gents, and just some of the comments that we're seeing from that statement from people that went to the event. Kurt Matador Darts saying, "What I saw today wasn't an inconvenience but a health risk." Jason putting, "Your bar staff went above and beyond expectation. The dart playing conditions are one thing, but for one young lady to be stood in the gents' toilets literally scooping urine out of the overflowing latrine at the same time as men are having a piss is an utter disgrace." I could go on because there's been a lot of comments on there, but of course we weren't there. We saw some of the pictures that are doing the rounds. What's your reaction when you see something like that? You've been to one Riley's a few weeks earlier, which went really well, but on the other side of things, you're seeing one like that, and that can really do damage to the reputation and potentially these qualifiers going forward.
It was horrendous, wasn't it? I mean, I don't think there's really up for much debate, is there, in terms of whether it's accurate or not, or whether it's real, because there's so many people saying it, and the evidence speaks for itself. So at least Riley's have come out and acknowledged that. I think one of the things, just declaration of interest. Obviously, I have freelanced for Riley's in the past in terms of producing multimedia content for them in relation to the qualifiers, but I'm not doing that this year. One of the things that I've always said throughout the qualifying competitions at Riley's is that it is very hit and miss. When it's a hit, it's normally really well done, and that's certainly always been my experience. But when it's a miss, it really does miss the mark. So this is not the first time in terms of, this is the worst in terms of health risk, certainly that we've seen. But obviously in the past we've had Wolverhampton going on until midnight. One of Fallon Sherrick's greatest achievements that often gets missed is that she won a qualifier at Wolverhampton at about midnight, and it started at midday. So that was where they played the quarterfinals one after the other on the same board. I mean, it's just bonkers, isn't it? All these spare boards, and they're playing it one after the other. Are you mental? That would be, it's just infuriating. It's so basic. And then Tony Martin's put up another photo, which is of the one in Nottingham, where there's hazard tape on the floor, no ocky. There's a big pole in the way, which is a barrier. So it's very hit and miss. Now, just on this similar sort of subject, there was an incident in Victoria where a video was posted of a player that had entered, right? Now, the player entered was completely, inebriated on alcohol and possibly other substances, who knows. But anyway, he was doing overthrow javelin throws with his darts, basically, in a very dangerous way that nearly, was missing the board. It was nearly hitting the marker. And one of the players took a video of this. I shared it because, we wanted to highlight the fact that he was removed from the tournament very quickly after this happened because of lack of effort, dangerous play, etc. And then he was kicked out of the venue, quite rightly. And that went viral. And we were then told to, remove that because, the PDC and Riley's, aren't happy about it. Well, what are they going to do about this other coverage? Is everyone else going to take that down as well? I mean, they're going to ring up Ros Bulmer and say, "Oh, sorry, Ros, that video, that's really bad, isn't it? Can you just take that down?" So it's hit and miss. When it's a miss, it's really bad. And I think that this may well be the straw that breaks the camel's back in terms of continuing Riley's events at for the UK Open qualifying, and perhaps this is where the amateur darts circuit needs to step in and have it in the big, the sports hall type setup, and have a big event in various parts of the UK. And of course, the other issue, which we always talk about, is that it was very restrictive to certain Riley's branches, because there aren't Riley's branches all across the UK, or they're not spread out in a way that's that everyone can get to in a timely manner. So Darts Class has tweeted this, of course, because he's in the southwest of England. Well, there isn't one near him for hours and hours and hours. So there are so many issues that just makes me wonder whether this will continue to be the case. Ultimately, as we know, the PDC probably don't particularly care, or maybe they do, I don't know, but I feel that as long as they get their 16, they probably don't care less. And in terms of, you know, their own media reputation, they are like Teflon, aren't they? They, you know, it doesn't matter what criticism you throw at them, that the machine rumbles on. So regardless of what's lobbied at them.
You look to what's coming up next weekend when we're talking, and it is the last weekend of this year's Riley's UK Open Amateur Qualifiers, potentially the last ever. We don't know. That's still up for debate, isn't it? But we've got 7 more next weekend, and funnily enough, we've got another one in Norwich next weekend, and hopefully it will be a lot better than it has been this weekend, and those conditions will be better. They've got 7 days to fix the issues that they've had this weekend, so we'll definitely be watching out for that to see the experiences like for the players next weekend. But as you say, seeing all those things that we saw on social media, and you got to say as well, the entries, they've had a lot of entries for these events. I think the one in Norwich was around 150 players, which is a great turnout for that. And it is £10 entry. When I played in it 5 years ago now, it's been a long time. When I played in my one, it was £6 entry and you got a free drink. So it's gone up to £10 now. I don't think you get a free drink anymore. So to see the standard of playing conditions worsen and you're paying more money isn't a good look, is it? So yeah, you mentioned the ADC. I think that is something that Steve Brown and the team there have really got to be looking at this year, because 2022 to do it, probably very, very early for them, isn't it? Because they've only just started this new organisation off the back of MAD, so they really need to build that reputation during the rest of this year, going into next year.
And can I just come in on that, Alex?
Yeah, of course you can.
Because there is actually an argument to say that it's outgrown Riley's, hasn't it? Because even in that sort of 6 to 7 year period, sort of since when I've been involved in, certainly from when you were playing in it as well, gone are the days when you would have sort of 32 to 50 people enter, Riley's Twickenham, for example, which doesn't actually exist now. Every single one of these tournaments now, especially because there's only 16 of them, gets, at least 100 people in it, and if not more. And, they're crammed in to this small venue. I mean, it's certainly a super spreader event, isn't it, dearie me? So, it's definitely outgrown because the interest has grown so much in dance, which is a great thing, but it's possibly now, too big for Riley's.
Yeah, and maybe you get the ADC to take on the ones in England. Maybe you look to other organisations. We're going to come on to how the PDC have linked up with the WDF in the last few weeks. Maybe we look to the England Darts Organisation, maybe the Welsh Darts Organisation, the organisations that we've got in Scotland, Northern Ireland, and they put on the qualifiers next year because, as we said on the last show, we do want to see that amateur representation still involved in the UK Open. So, yeah, we'll see how this weekend upcoming plays out, especially that one in Norwich if they improve the facilities. But maybe it is time to look elsewhere, look to bigger venues and continue this amateur aspect of the UK Open and somewhere else.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly agree with that. My only fear, of course, with the PDC is that really, do they really care about it? I mean, hopefully they do. Obviously this comes onto a wider issue in relation to the players that are actually getting through, doesn't it? So, obviously we've seen Danny Lauby Jr., Diogo Portela, Kai Van Leung, and, the debate that comes up every year is, well, are they amateurs? Would you say that they're amateurs, really? And is it fair? Where do I sit on that? I'm not so sure, really. I mean, I think that, if you're coming through a tournament in 8 hours, 8.5 hours, which is normally how long these things take, if not even longer. In reality, you do deserve to get through. But certainly, seeing Steve Grayson coming through in Nottingham, kitchen fitter who's never played on telly before, is certainly a nicer story. Certainly, what do you think?
I'm in agreement there, and I guess really the first 3 qualifiers that we saw come through these Riley's amateur qualifiers, they were Diogo Portela, Danny Lauby Jr., Kai Van Leung. Kai Van Leung's just dropped off the tour. The other 2 we saw play in the biggest tournament in darts, the World Championship in December. So would you class those 3 as amateur players? Probably not, but that is a grey area, isn't it? You've got the 128 tour card holders that we don't talk too much about on this show, but are all of them professionals? No, you've got some of them that are still working and playing darts on the side, but under the 128, you do have players that are professionals, and darts is their thing they do all the time. They don't do any work aside from that. It is darts all the time. So it is kind of a grey area. When you're looking at these qualifiers, how would you then say, right, well, those players, darts is their profession, they're not allowed to play in it? It's a tough one, isn't it? For me, like you say, if you've got a player that's coming through this qualifier, best of 7, the conditions can be a bit hit and miss at times, as we've spoken about, then I think they deserve every credit for coming through the qualifier, because like everyone else, they've got to pay their £10, turn up at 11, 12 o'clock for the registration. They might not play their first game until 3, 4 o'clock, given how many players are entered in these events and how many boards there are. So they're all in the same boat. They've all got to go through the same rigmarole to get through this qualifier. So for me, they have every respect from me to get through them qualifiers. And as we've seen, there is a mix of players that are coming through. I mean, you look at the one in Norwich yesterday, we had, I think James Richardson went to it, a few other ex-tour card holders were there, but the player that came through, Matthew Good, someone that we've never heard of before, he's won the qualifier. And a few others, you mentioned Steve Clayson, 59-year-old from Derby, kitchen fitter, who's never been in a TV event before. Graham Hall winning one of the events this weekend, Adam Warner as well. So we are still seeing that mix of players. So I think the current setup, you are going to get players, the likes of, as we've said, the 3 that came through the first 3, but you are at the same time going to get players come out the woodwork and get those qualifier spots. And we've got to mention as well, Paul Hogan as well. He does deserve a mention. It's going to be his 7th UK Open, the 6th time he's qualified as a Riley's qualifier. It's a great story, isn't it? The professional amateur back in the UK Open for the first time in a few years. It is great to see. But these stories, they come from the Riley's qualifiers. Some of them players that we do know, some of them that we don't know. And I think as long as that mix is still there and we're not seeing 16 names that we've seen playing it before, players that are well-known household names, I don't see an issue with it.
Well, that aside, Paul Hogan's actually got the record for Riley's qualifications.
I'm not surprised.
So I completely forgot to tweet that. Never mind, I'll do that Monday. But and historically, of course, the amateur qualification for the UK Open has been a sort of a potted history. And I think the worst qualification, if we remember, was where you have to go to a warehouse, throw 15 darts at a board, you'd get your points tallied up, and then the top 16 of those would then play off against one another in a this is all real, you can look this up.
Oh my God.
Play off against each other in a best of 3 match, and then you would get all sorts of people that would getting through that probably didn't really wouldn't really stand the test of time or last very long in the tournament itself. And then the worst one, and the sponsor will remain nameless because we don't want to get sued for libel, but when they sponsored it, they would have exhibitions in their own sort of warehouse type venues. Oops, maybe I've given it away. Against a professional player, so they would have their own mini tournament. And if they were they were staff members only, bearing in mind, if they would win their mini event, then they would qualify. And it's that. Can you imagine that now? I mean, it's totally bonkers, isn't it? Really. So historically, it's always been an interesting one, amateur qualification for the UK Open. It'll be my specialist subject, I think.
Well, we're going to move on to other darts moments. Some breaking news, actually, since we started recording. Jelle Klaasen has won today's qualifier in Coventry. So that's another, just a former world champion coming through these qualifiers, and every credit to him for coming through, because I think he played one on Saturday and wasn't successful, went to one today, the one in Coventry, and gets that spot in the UK Open. So congratulations to him. We've got 8 more spots, or 7 more spots I should say now, to fill from those Riley's amateur qualifiers. But let's move on to the WDF, and the biggest news from them since we last spoke is that the 7 tour card holders, the players that won their tour cards at Q School that had qualified for Lakeside, the postponed Lakeside, will be allowed to play at Lakeside, even though they have got those tour cards. 5 of the 7 have accepted those spots in the Lakeside. They are still going to play in it. 2 of them, Ross Montgomery, Mario van den Bogarde, they've decided not to enter it because there are PDC events on the same weekend. I think Players Championship events, European Tour qualifiers. But 5 of the 7, they have decided they are going to play to the Lakeside. When you saw the news that the PDC were going to allow those players to play still, what was your reaction?
I actually wasn't too surprised, because I can't remember whether we talked about this before, but if you remember historically, John Michael got a tour card a few years ago, and then he'd already booked up, I think, to play in the Romanian Open, and he was given an exemption. to then play in that. And then he ended up on the stream, and it turned out to be one of the worst streams you've ever seen in your life. Grainy 1980s type grainy footage. So I just wondered whether that actually they were going to get an exemption, and it turns out obviously that they have. And I think this is probably fairly complimentary actually of the WDF staff and the professional way of which they are going about their business, because could you really have imagined this of going through with the previous incarnation of the BDO and the staff and the outfit that were there? Probably not. So it's great for those those 5 players that are going to go to Lakeside, because it does mean a lot. However, it's fair to say the news did not go down with very well with everyone, because one player wrote a very long expletive filled rant on Facebook in terms of saying, well, actually I chose not to go to Q School because I wanted to play at Lakeside, and because of the dates and the way that it's worked out, because the WDF cancelled. Well, why wasn't this communicated to the rest of the players that were involved?
Yeah, that is a very good point, and I think the news was mostly met with positive feedback, but as you say, there was a little bit of negative feedback, some from the players that weren't tour card holders, some of them that decided not to go to Q School because they wanted to keep that spot at Lakeside. Now, had they known that if they'd have got that tour card, they would have been allowed to play at Lakeside still, then they probably would have gone to Q School. You just don't know, do you? It's disappointing for those players that maybe would have had the backing this year to go to Q School and give it a go. Sometimes we know players, they don't have that backing every single year. It kind of comes up every now and then for them to have a good crack at it. And even the form as well for these players. They've qualified for Lakeside, they've maybe won events or gone deep in events. The form and the confidence is probably at its highest at that point. So they would have probably gone into Q School this year feeling like that was maybe one of their best shots at getting the tour card. So you kind of feel for those players a little bit. But I think in the overall grand scheme of things, looking at the game as a whole, this can only be viewed as good news. And it might just be a one-off. We don't know, because the Lakeside next year, you assume it's going to go back to that January slot. If it stays in its April slot, then we're having a different conversation. Is this going to be something that we see happen every year? The players that get tour cards that have qualified for Lakeside being allowed to play in it every year, that's something that we don't know. But if it goes back to its January slot, it's something that this will be just a one-off, won't it? We won't have to worry about players going to Q School because it will follow the Lakeside and then they can do whatever they like, can't they? It doesn't matter. But I think, yeah, for the game as a whole, to have that link up between the WDF, the PDC, I think just the PDC and any amateur semi-professional body is good, because as you touched on, this wouldn't have happened under the BDO. We wouldn't have seen the PDC say, yeah, you guys, you can go and play in the BDO World Championship. I think there is a conscious effort, I think, for the WDF and the PDC, both sides, to get on, and that is what's best for darts. To have all these organisations on good terms with each other, I think can only be a good thing. So yeah, I was a little bit surprised by the news, but then thinking about it, this is a newish organisation for darts, and the WDF, I don't think they've really annoyed the PDC with anything they've done. They're pretty new to the whole putting on World Championships and World Masters. So as long as there's that good relationship, as there has been so far, it can only be a good thing for darts.
Yeah. Now, of course, I spoke to Nick Fulwell, for example, in that interview, and he was really disappointed that he was going to miss out on Lakeside, even though he did obviously achieve his goal of winning a card. So he'll obviously be really, really pleased about that. And he's one of the 5 that's accepted it to go to Lakeside, which of course is less than 2 months away. And I think you're going, Alex, and I think I'm going on the Sunday, hopefully. Not sure whether I've told you that yet.
No, that is more breaking news on the show. That's great to hear that you'll be there as well. I'm hoping to get up there for the first weekend now. The original plan, when it was going to be held in January, I was going to be there for the last 3 days, I think the Friday, Saturday and Sunday. So quarterfinals through to the finals down the Sunday. Unfortunately, work commitments means I can't make the second weekend, but I can make the first weekend, which I guess on the other side of things, I'm not going to see the winners crowned in person, but I'm going to see a lot more players, because those first couple of days, there's a lot of darts to get through the first and second rounds, particularly that first round. There's going to be a lot of games to get through. So hopefully we'll get a lot of coverage, a lot of interviews with different players that weekend. But it's soon coming around, isn't it? We've got less than 2 months to go now. I think it's around 7 weeks to go. How the WDF is going to go forward these next few months, because there's not a lot of events coming up really. We saw our good friend Andrew Sinclair on one of the streams in Iceland, which was great to see last weekend when we were talking. Good to see him in action and getting in a lot more practice than I am for our game at Lakeside. But aside from that, there's a few weekends coming up, the Isle of Man in March, but it is all eyes on that World Championship. And as we know, a lot of people were saying that the Lakeside was postponed because of poor ticket sales and the virus was used as an excuse. Well, there's not going to be any excuses now, is there? That things are opening up a lot more now. We are seeing players being able to get over to the UK a lot more easily now. So it is a case of now getting these tickets sold, isn't it? I'm not quite sure how the ticket sales are going at the moment, whether they're still relatively low, but they've got 2 months now, best part of 2 months, to really push things. And I know they've started putting a few bits out. I think a post every day promoting some of the games that are going to be taking place. But I think they need to be doing a lot more promotion-wise, because we want to see people in the venue. We want to see it packed out for as much as possible. And we're not going to touch on it too much, but we've just seen the World Seniors take place at the Circus Tavern, a similar size venue, and that was pretty much packed out for the whole weekend. And okay, it's different demographics, different players involved, but we're going to see the legends back at the Lakeside at the end of May. And you'd imagine, given that we've just seen that event at the Circus Tavern and a lot of attention on it, you'd expect that to sell out quite well. So, yeah, it's a lot of work for the WDF to do now to make sure that their event as well is as popular.
Yes, totally agree. And, of course, another organisation that gets a lot of our attention, and rightly so, is the newly named Amateur Darts Circuit. And we've got rankings at last.
Come on.
Amazing. So let's brief history of this. Modern Amateur Darts, MAD, or MAD, as I refuse to call it. It started in lockdown, launched to great fanfare. The belts, got to talk about belts. It wouldn't be an under 128 if we didn't talk about belts, which strangely quiet on, has to be said, recently. Were basically the only sort of success that I would argue that the MAD enjoyed over that sort of 12-month period. And they've now rebranded to the ADC, and Darts Atlas is on board. Matt Lang, a friend of the show, has done a fantastic job, and we can now see results, live scores, a calendar of events. You can click on each player to get their most recent results, and we've got these tables which I bleated long and hard about all throughout last year, much to everyone's boredom and to tedium, because Darts has been crying out for this. It's been crying out for a calendar and to be able to search for your local open by postcode. As basic as that sounds, nothing existed. It's been crying out for player profiles from a regional level of how well they're doing. These things now exist thanks to Darts Atlas, and of course it does the Dart Connect type Darts Windows type live scoring from each event if you've got a tablet and you sync up to their system. So massive thumbs up for this. It's a very good start, and I think the theme of this podcast as a whole is similar to other events, is that it's a good foundation from which to build from. But now the challenge is what comes next. Yes, it's great. I can see that Lee Budgeon, who of course missed out on legs 1 for a tour card this year, he's won today in Hull. Tom Cronwell has won at Riley's Chester. There's Riley's again. And Mark Dudbridge has won a tournament in Bristol over this weekend. But what does that mean? What rewards does that get them now? And obviously they've got the ADC have their tour coming up this year, so that's a good start. But what about those big events that MAD did launch in their initial paraphernalia, which was the British Amateur Open, the League Championship, the Golden Gauntlet, yes, there it is again, the European Championship, which never really happened. It was meant to happen at Chelsea, and then it got canned, and then it disappeared. Where are those events? And are the belts no more? Because there are still belt holders that were potentially due a cash windfall, because if people put in challenges, then it would have that money racer type element. I'm not too worried about that part, but it's still a question worth asking. And if you are top of your rankings, because remember you are Alex a Eagle, and I am a Titan. I will just seamlessly get the ranking lists here in front of me. So in the England Eagles, Michael Burgoyne, former UK Open qualifier, multi-qualifier, he is winning in the region, and I am a Titan, and Adam Mould is winning that. Well, what does that mean? Because at the moment, yes, it's very nice to see them doing well, but in the grand scheme of things, I'm not sure they know what that means, and I'm not sure we know what it means either.
Yeah, and just looking at those rankings as well, you've got in third place on the Wales Patriots, Peter Wright with 1 point. Is that from his winning the Premier League in Cardiff? Probably not. It's probably a different Peter Wright, isn't it? But yeah, like you say, it's great to see the rankings available for the ADC, because it is something that we were going on and on about during the mad era of what this is. And yeah, unfortunately, those rankings never really materialised. We saw a few bits here and there, but this is a lot better start, isn't it? And like I said on the last episode when we were talking about the ADC's launch, it was a lot softer launch than the MAD one 12 months earlier. And I think Steve Brown said himself that some of the mistakes that they've learned from MAD, they were going to take into the ADC to make sure they didn't make those same mistakes again. And I think one of those mistakes was the launch that they did back in December 2020 when we were all in the lockdown. All these ideas and things that they wanted to bring into the amateur game, it kind of was a little bit too much too soon. So the softer launch I'm a fan of, and I guess really now we want to see more, don't we, as darts fans? When we see these things launched, we want to see what else is to come, and it's been a reasonable start. The rankings is definitely a thumbs up from me. I think, as you say, you can look on Darts Atlas, great work that Matt Langen's doing, and you can see all the rankings, everything's there for you, the results, the calendar, the rankings for your region, the overall rankings. But I think now what I'd like to see is a bit more presence on social media, on their website. I know they put out a post about Damon Heta winning one of the events and it got a bit of flack. That doesn't bother me at all. If professionals are coming to these events, open events, which they've done for many, many years, this isn't a new thing, but I guess promoting the results through them, maybe promote that result, promote all the other results as well, because it kind of felt like they were just showing off a little bit that Damon Heta turned up to this event and won it. You've got a lot more events going on. Promote those results as well. We want to see all the winners and all the players that have done well. We want to see their achievements celebrated on that social media platform that they've got. So for me, let's see more of them results posted out on social media. Let's see more promotion of the events that are coming up. I know it's a lot to do, but you've got the regions there as well. Let's see maybe people get more involved in that. The regions put out a bit more information as well would be good. So for me, that's what I'd like to see next. As far as the belts, yeah, that is something that's gone very quiet. As you can see from their website, the Undisputed series is just now going under with these belts. It is something that is still going to be a part of the ADC. I'm guessing that they are putting plans in place for those exhibition events, the dates, the venues, and then they're going to start promoting it, because we've not seen much about the belts since the launch. Maybe that's something that's going to come further down the line. But yeah, like you say, it's been a good start for ADC. Let's see some more. Yeah,
I mean, obviously there's that ongoing debate, of course, in relation to what they're doing for women's darts, which we discussed in the last episode. There's still no news on if it's going to be a women's only offering. It'll be interesting to see if they do that. The other thing I would say is that I've spoken to a few organisers that were, directors under the old MAD banner, that were disappointed with the way that it went. And there's perhaps a bit of frustration and disillusionment with if they're going to then carry on in relation to the ADC side of things. So, that was all just the murmurings that I heard in relation to that. So that will be interesting to see how that pans out. Because then, of course, the big challenge that the ADC have is trying to get all opens under this banner, because a lot aren't and will continue not to be.
Very good point. Well, you mentioned ladies only events. There is a ladies only event that has been announced since we last spoke, and that is the Women's World Matchplay. This is being put on by the PDC. They're going to stage its first televised women's tournament this summer with the Women's World Matchplay, which is going to take place at the Winter Gardens in Blackpool during the World Matchplay. Is going to take place on that Sunday session, afternoon session before the final. What was your reaction to this news? Because again, it's big news from the PDC and a big development for the ladies' game.
Well, it's great news. It's great news, and it's been a long time coming, really. And I was thinking they might do something in relation to the Premier League and have a women's version of that. But this is very, very good. I don't know what the format is yet for this, but it'll certainly be a very good afternoon, and it's the next best thing, really. So absolutely kudos to the PDC, because if you remember, historically, I and many others, it has to be said, complained from the years between, I think it was around 2011 to 2017, when the PDC did absolutely nothing for women's darts. There was no argument about that. They didn't do anything for women's darts after their foray into their World Championship, which they held, and infamously none of the quote unquote a lot of women didn't play in it because they didn't want to lose ranking points from the BDO. The only women they had involved in primarily in the PDC were passively walking men to the stage and blowing kisses at the camera. I'm straying into dangerous territory here, so let's move on. But once the walk-on girls went, and then suddenly they had the Fallon effect, and 2 women in the World Championship every year, and getting record numbers. God, this is good, isn't it? Let's do more for women's darts as a result. So anyway, it doesn't matter how you get there. They've got there now with a fantastic women's series and the World Matchplay. It'll be very exciting for them, and hopefully it boosts the number of women that will enter and play in the women's series, which will be used as the qualifying route to get into it.
Yeah, and I guess really a strange coincidence of this return for the PDC showing women's televised darts. As you mentioned, they did have that Women's World Championship just the one year, 2010, the title going to the late Stacey Bromberg, 6-5 against Tricia Wright. The final was played at the Winter Gardens in Blackpool. It was shown on Sky Sports, but this 12 years on is a much bigger development, a lot more opportunities for the ladies, isn't it? You're going to get 8 players playing in that afternoon session, 7 games of darts. It's a big commitment for the PDC, and we think back, you've mentioned it on our show before, the comments that Barry Hearn, the former PDC chairman, said to us when we spoke about what the PDC's plans were for ladies darts, and he likened having a women's only tour to having a tour for people that parted their hair a certain way. So we have come a long way since those comments, and I kind of feel like this is something that has got Eddie Hearn, the new PDC chairman's, fingerprints all over it, because we look at his other sports that he's involved in, and particularly boxing. I know he's a promoter of Katie Taylor, who is one of the most popular women's boxers there is, and she's going to be, I don't follow it too much, but I know that she's going to be boxing at Madison Square Garden, which is going to be the first time that there's been a women's fight headline a boxing show at one of the most famous boxing arenas there is. So he's someone that knows the potential, knows the possibilities, the interest that there is in women's sport. So I definitely think this is something that has got Eddie Hearn's involvement in from the start. Matthew Porter as well, the chief executive, we know that he's a fan of the ladies' game, and the interest that Fallon brought into the darts from her run at Ali Pali, they want to cash in on that. And I guess having this Women's World Match Play, the qualification, we should mention as well, it is going to be based on the top performers from the Women's Series this year following the first 12 events of the year. So again, it is something for the ladies to go into that Women's Series, and there is that extra carrot on the end of it that you get to qualify for this event, and the winner of this Women's World Match Play gets a spot at the Grand Slam. So would we have seen this a couple of years ago? Probably not, but I'm glad we are seeing it now. It's another opportunity for the ladies. There is that prize fund on offer as well. I think 25 grand prize fund for this event, more money in the ladies' game. I'm pleased to see it.
Yeah, no, it's really, really exciting. So certainly adds an extra element of spice on the women's series, which kicks off, in a couple of weeks' time. And moving on to another sort of one of the secondary tours under the 128, of course, is the Challenge Tour weekend, marathon weekend, as we know. Is now done and dusted, much probably to the relief of players and officials involved, because they are very long days. So for the first time ever, we had 5 in one weekend. And the first thing to say is that they've done a great job in terms of correcting the mistake that they had by holding the 4th event because they used to do two. Used to do two a day, two on a Saturday, two on a Sunday, and the last event on a Sunday would always finish at a stupid o'clock at something like 11:30. People have got work the next day because obviously everyone has jobs and they've travelled from a long way away, including abroad in many cases. So they've now do two on the Friday, two on the Saturday, one on the Sunday, which is a much better way of doing it. So full kudos to them for that. And even though the prize money hasn't gone up since 2014, which I don't ever mention when discussing on this podcast, as we know, but Scott Williams will, of course, be the happiest of everyone there because he won two events in a day. Totally bonkers. But that will, mean he's on the Pro Tour as a top-up probably for the rest of the season, just on the basis of that.
Yeah, that was very impressive from Scott Williams, and we spoke to him on the Weekly Darts Cast the week after, I think it was now, about that achievement, and we touched on as well the potential improvements that could be made to the Challenge Tour. And I think having the two events on a Friday, two Saturday, one on the Sunday, it's definitely an improvement on how things were before with them two events on a Sunday. But how could you make it even better? This is the Challenge Tour. This is the secondary tour from the PDC. You want to make it as good as possible. Some of his ideas, he suggested maybe having more boards. I know we said about the second event on the Friday and Saturday that it's starting earlier than it would have done before. That's a good move. But he said maybe have more boards, maybe find other venues that would allow to have more boards so you could get through the events a bit quicker. That's an option maybe for the future. Another one doing the rounds, one that I thought of was maybe having a rolling order of merit for the Challenge Tour so that some of these players are seeded for these events. So if you do win a title, you do go far in an event, you're not coming back 15 minutes later. You do have a little bit of a break because, as we know, you don't get exactly 128, exactly 256 players enter these events. So there are going to be buys in the field. Maybe that's something that we see going forward. I don't know. But yeah, good to see the Challenge Tour come back. And we've seen some of these players do pretty well on the Pro Tour in the last couple of weekends. Coming back in a few weeks' time, start of April, we're going to see the second weekend of the Challenge Tour in Germany. We've got the next two weekends in Germany, which is good to see that mix of events from England to Germany starting to feel more like a proper tour for the PDC. So yeah, I'm pleased with how things are going with the Challenge Tour as well.
Yeah, well, I think one of the ideas that I was sort of swaying towards was, why don't you just keep it as a European and UK split, because it was fairly evenly split previously for last year. And whether there's enough money to do this, of course, is another question entirely. But my criticism, of course, of the prize fund, I think, is still a valid one. But last year, actually, because it was split between the UK and Europe, and they kept the prize fund the same, it was a real opportunity to really make some money out of it, because there were fewer players. Whereas this time, you have to win 3 games to win £50. At a very, very high standard. But, what do I know? They still get record turnouts. So, so it's just one of those things, isn't it? The player that benefited the most out of all those Challenge Tour players, I mean, Scott Williams did do well on the Pro Tour. It's always worth keeping an eye on it. But was Lee Evans, who's picked up £6,000 from those 4 Pro Tours that he's been in. So certainly taking advantage of that, and again, all those top-up players will be in for the next 4 Pro Tours at least before the next Challenge Tour weekend in Germany, as you say.
And lastly, it does feel like a long time ago now. We've seen some of these players do well on the Pro Tour the last couple of weekends, but in our last show we were looking ahead to the return of Q School, and we've got our 128 tour card holders once again. We've got our 32 players, I think, that got tour cards over the week in England and Germany from this year's Q School. What did you make of the final field of players to come through and what they've done so far?
Yeah, very strong, very strong. It does seem like an eternity ago, doesn't it? But yeah, I mean, it does get harder and harder every year. It's a terrible cliche, isn't it? But it does, and it is brutal. And just to give you an idea about how brutal it is, we forget, of course, that it is split across, it's split across 2 stages, and you do that pre-qualification for that final stage. Well, one of those players that didn't make stage 2, Lee Evans. So you can actually then, bounce back and salvage a season somewhat, through the Challenge Tour route. Yeah, I mean, there's so many amazing stories aren't there really? And mostly due to those that are very experienced, likes of Wilson, Webster, Montgomery. There's a name that we never thought would ever, win his card and win his place on the tour. He's one of course, the players that has turned down his place at Lakeside, even though he'd qualified for it. And Richie Burnett, who's given a very interesting, nice interview with BBC Wales, saying it's his last dance on the dance floor. I think that's the metaphor. I hope I haven't tortured that. And of course, Kevin Burness won a tour card, and that meant he couldn't play in the seniors either, along with Burnett. I was pleased to see, obviously Connor Scott, but we know all about that. George Killington winning one, because there's a guy who had a really tough couple of years when he was on the tour. Previously, really talented, has been highly talented in the local area where I am, but for many years. Did some lockdown streaming with me as well when we were doing virtual dance. Remember virtual dance?
Try not to.
Yeah, exactly. But did do some virtual streaming with me when we weren't allowed in the pub to social clubs to play. So obviously, I do have a soft spot in that regard. And I guess we're still waiting for Vladimir Anderson to play. But there's a name, previously that was very highly touted and is now back again. So there's so many really interesting stories came through. And just one last name, but just before we move on, obviously, when I was at Riley's Benfleet 2 years ago yesterday for the UK Open qualifier, two people that missed out in the last 16 of O'Reilly's UK Open qualifier. We've now got tour cards. They won them at Q School. That's Connor Scott and Brian Roman.
There you go. That just shows the standard of these Riley's qualifiers. We might not know every name in the field, but there is a lot of names in there that can do some damage. And yeah, looking at the list of players I've got in front of me here, and we spoke about it after Q School, a very good mix of players, isn't it? You've got a lot of names that we've known from in the past, players that have had tour cards before, players that maybe haven't had tour cards but have come very close to getting them. Talking about players like Cameron Menzies, who he's come close on a few occasions via the Challenge Tour, I know, to getting that tour card. He's now finally got one. Touching on some of the interviews that we managed to get after Q School, and one of my favourite ones already from this year was your one with Sean Wilkinson, probably the most unknown player, you'd say, from the class of 2022. He got his tour card in traumatic circumstances. He got the final spot on the UK Order of Merit, winning it not on points, not on legs difference, goal differential as me and Burton call it, but on legs won, just ahead of Lee Budgeon and Matthew Dennant. So the tightest of margins, that's how he got his tour card, and it was great to hear him chat with you after it. I don't think many people have heard from him yet, so that's one of the things I always enjoy about these Q School wrap-up shows, is speaking to some of these players that have got tour cards, and some of them that we've never heard of before, and he's definitely one, but we're going to find out more about him in these next couple of years. But yeah, from what we've seen the first couple of weekends on the Pro Tour, we've got to mention Connor Scott, haven't we? Getting to a semi-final yesterday when we were talking his best ever run on a Pro Tour event so far. It was really good to see. Another name we don't know too much about, Danny Jansen. I saw today he had I think it was 106 average to beat Michael Smith on the stream. So we are seeing some of these players, and George Killington as well, beating Rob Cross on the stream as well this weekend. We are seeing some of the lesser known players really make their mark already, which is great to see. It's good to see these players settling into life on the tour very, very quickly, and we're going to see a lot more of them over these next 2 years, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, very much thanks Sean Wilkinson for his time. He really enjoyed it, and his family really appreciated the interviews. That was good. Yet to get off the mark yet in terms of games. It reminds me a lot of the Aaron Beanie story from a couple of years ago, actually, in terms of not many people would have been aware of who Sean Wilkinson was prior to him winning a card. Obviously, no surprise to those in Cheshire, of course. And that's the great thing, isn't it? People who excel in their local region, doing very well at perhaps against all expectations. He was a regular for the Cheshire County side. Obviously, we should mention the UKDA, of course, while we're here. Everything seems to be ticking along very nicely. Obviously, they're doing a very good job on social media, and the counties are up and running again and putting on a very good show. And you can track all the results on their website and on Darts for Windows, which can be a bit clunky, but If you click the like buttons, it's okay. Obviously, their big target for later on in the year in April is, of course, the Magic Weekend. So that's the first of its kind, and we await to see how that goes, because that's you're going to get all these counties descending on this one venue. It'd be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, definitely will, and we'll give a lot more coverage to the UKDA, I think, nearer the time, won't we, when we're coming up to that Magic Weekend, which I believe I've got in front of me, the 23rd of April, so only a few months away now. That's going to take place in Rotherham. Then you've also got the national finals. I believe that's going to be in June sometime as well. It might be the same venue as well, actually, but yeah, we'll definitely give a lot more coverage to them in the lead up to those events, and as we get towards the end of the first ever UKDA season, which will be good to see. And you mentioned Aaron Beanie, we should mention his darts away from the 128, and unfortunately he's no longer a tour card holder, but it was great to see him post that picture over the weekend on social media with a trophy in his hand, back involved in the prison darts side of things and winning an event. So nice to see him back lifting some silverware, and I'm sure we'll see him back very, very soon. Maybe the WDF, maybe the PVC, maybe the UKDA, we don't know, but hopefully we'll see him involved in a bit more darts as well going forward. But before we close out the show, we should give a mention to our plans, which are going to be coming up very, very soon, and that is with the UK Open. We're probably not going to win through the Riley's qualifiers next weekend, but we are going to be going to Minehead.
Yes, this is very exciting. So I've been banging on about this for a few years, that we should go and do this. So I often go and do a Friday afternoon cameo at the really busy, the busiest session, most bonkers session is what Dave Allen describes it as, at the UK Open. And, during lockdown, and then watching the one that was behind closed doors last year, I thought, my God, if there's ever an opportunity to go back there, you don't know what you've got until it's gone. Then, my God, we're going to make sure that we go there. Boards 3 to 8 in that bar. Alex and I will be there, or I will be there throughout, but Alex might go to the board 2 or the well, to have a look, because while we're there, might as well. And we're going to have. We obviously want to see as many of you there as we can, all of our listeners, just to say thank you, and we will have some stickers to give out to anyone that comes and finds us in the bar and says hello.
Yes, definitely. We ordered a fresh batch of the Weekly Dartscast stickers. They have arrived at my house, so I will be bringing them with me to Minehead. So if you are going to Minehead for the UK Open, if you are going to be there for that Friday afternoon session, then do get in touch with us on social media and come and find us. And you can have some Weekly Dartscast stickers. I know they're very sought after whenever we put a thing out on social media. A lot of people want to get hold of them, so there's your chance. If you are going to Minehead, you can get some stickers from us if we've got any left, because we're expecting a lot of you to come and see us, of course. But yeah, really looking forward to that. Not long to go now until Minehead, and we'll bring as much coverage from especially that multi-board room, because when I went to the UK Open, I think 6 years ago now, for the weekend, that was the only session that I missed. We were travelling during that Friday afternoon session, so looking forward to completing the UK Open set and being there for that Friday afternoon. As I say, we'll try and bring as much coverage from that afternoon session as we can, try and get as many interviews as we can. We'll see what the situation's like as far as getting hold of the players. Hopefully we'll be able to get as many as we can, but of course we'll be chatting amongst ourselves and giving you our view on the action as well. So yeah, looking forward to that. I think that's just about everything there is for this show. Is there anything else that you wanted to add, Matthew, before we go?
No, I did. Well, just to say, we should probably mention the Live League, which sometimes is referred to as the never-ending league, isn't it? But the Live League has come back and is ticking along really well. They've got rid of the Monday day, so it's slightly longer break, so they can have a weekend, which is always quite good. So it's not Saturday, then a break on a Sunday and straight into a Monday. But that's ticking along very nicely. And obviously those that have just fallen off the tour are now playing in that. So, it's freshened it up. But, that's all that we can say about the Live League at the moment. But, full steam ahead to the UK Open.
Yeah, funny you mentioned the Live League as well. I forgot to put that on the spreadsheet, but I went to my grandparents earlier today, and my granddad, I think he's in his 80s, late 70s, he said, "Did you watch the darts last night?" And I was trying to think what the darts was, and he said the one with Chris Mason, and there wasn't much atmosphere there. And I said, well, that's because there's no fans there. It's played in I think he called it a shed or something. So he's now a fan of the Live League if he's got nothing else on Saturday evenings to watch. So more fans watching the live league, new players involved. Shout out to Matthew Edgar, who's announced himself as the weekly Dartscast shirt of the year with his new shirt. Long way to go. We could see some new shirts during the rest of 2022. I'm sure we will. So small competition for him to try and win back that award, which he wants so much. That is all the time we've got for you on this Under the 128. Probably the next one will be when we're in Minehead or just after Minehead, looking back on it. So yeah, look forward to that. Lots of darts coming up, lots of darts that we've spoken about. Good to see more darts coming back. Fingers crossed we'll see the Riley's Norwich qualifier go off without a hitch next week, and we'll be back to talk about it all very, very soon. So for Matthew Kiernan, I'm Alex Moss. Enjoy the darts.